What's the most important play in football? Anyone? What's the most important play?
The next one.
The next play. The next play. In other words, right? Even if, when they make a mistake, there's nothing they can do about it. They need to what? Learn from it and move on. Right? So once again, it's talking to your kid about being present, because their teammates are counting on them, what? To be present for the next play. And once again, when I do student athlete workshops, right, I talk about mental toughness. Right? And part of being mentally tough is being able to what? Move beyond those mistakes and be present for the next play for your teammates. Now, research shows that when our student athletes focus on the mastery definition, two things happen. Their anxiety goes what? Down, and their self-confidence go up. Right? Mastery gives a player a feeling of control. In other words, if your kids are playing against the top team in the state, can they control their effort? Can they control their effort? You better believe it. Can they control how much they learn? Can they control how they respond to mistakes? And that's what gives them that feeling of control. And research says they'll do two things. They'll work harder and they'll stick to it longer. That's what we want from our kids on and off the athletic field. Okay? Question. What is character? We always talk about character. I like to quote, character. Any idea? What is character? We want our kids to have good character.
Character is who you are, what you do when no one's looking.
Okay, who you are, what you do when no one's looking, like that. Right. Say again. Okay, values you're sticking to.
Strength.
Say again. Strength. Okay.
Morals.
Say it again.
Morals.
Okay, you're on my page. Morals. Always say this. You can't talk about character until you first talk about two other things. One is personality. In other words, right? Kids learn how to behave based on what the environment expects of them. In other words, a kid, if they're not genuine, their personality is a facade. Well, what am I saying? There are some young men I coach. Sometimes they may have some behavior challenges, and here's what happens, right? I bring it to their parents' attention, and here's what their parents say. Oh no, not my child. Yeah, your child. Right? Because they learn how to behave based on what? What the environment expects, right? The other thing is temperament. In other words, it's hereditary. There are 4 basic temperaments: sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic. Right? Now, with your temperament comes what? Strengths as well as weaknesses. Let me give an example. My natural temperament is a choleric. What was my strength? Anytime I got knocked down, I was what? Getting right back up. Here's my weakness as a choleric. Wasn't a team player. All right. So, here's what we simply saying. What is character? It's your temperament modified by 6 things that make up your character. Here are the 6. Number 1, your basic attitude. Always say, what you think affects how you feel affects how you behave. If your child has an attitude, why? It's because of his thought life. So, basic attitude. 2, beliefs. It's your beliefs that gives you what? A moral compass, a standard for how you live your life. Right? Watch this. Isn't that why you sit up here? Right? 3, ready? Here's what I tell coaches. Any coaches in the room? Right? Here's what I tell coaches. Sorry, there's nothing we can do about this one. 3rd, childhood training. In other words, can I help you with something? All right. My son and I, right, didn't agree upon much until he turned 17. In other words, here's what I heard my son say when he was 17. I can't wait to turn 18. We finally agreed. We finally agreed. All right. So what happened on his 18th birthday? All right. I gave him his gift. He gave me my key. In other words, here's what I felt like my responsibility was as a parent. Ready? Is to prepare him to leave. I'm serious now. My job was to prepare that boy to get out of my house. Can I help you with something? I tried to help him along the way. In other words, all right, first of all, I always told him that room, that's my room. You borrowed it. All right? So I tried to prepare him. When he turned 15, I started having him take stuff down. I didn't just spring it on him. So you gotta start taking stuff down out of my room. All right? So once again, I'm just simply saying that I felt like my responsibility was to prepare him. Listen, he should be in somebody's college at 18. I prepared him to go off to college. So now can I help you with something? I'll be honest. If I had a girl, it would have been different. She could have stayed, I don't care how long she could have stayed, but that boy got to get out of my house. Listen, can I help you with something? All right? I wasn't going to submit to him. If he didn't want to obey my rules, you got to get out. All right? So, childhood training. So here's what I'm simply saying. You know what the best word for teens are? No. Did you know that word was invented for teens? Oftentimes, I'm serious, I've been in youth development over 20 years. I know a lot of teens are selfish, right? But once again, we have more what? Wisdom, right? We know what's around the corner before they even what? Go around it. So once again, childhood training. Fourth, education. In other words, I do a workshop with high school athletes. Here's what I tell them. Stand if you're an athlete. I don't stand. All right, okay, have a seat. Now stand if you're a student athlete. Once again, it's a mental shift. Get into it and understand that. Guess what? You're not an athlete. You are a what? Student athlete. Right? So once again, education. Right? And then also principles. Do you live your life by a set of principles and motivation? Your beliefs is what gives you your motivation, your reason for being here. You should have purpose. So what I'm simply saying, character is your temperament modified by those 6 things that make up your child's character. Right? So there are 3 things that influence your child's character. 1 is their huddle. Who they hang out with. In other words, you become a mirror of your huddle. You begin to conduct yourself like the individuals in your huddle. So once again, I'm just simply saying as a parent, one of the things when my son came home, here's my question. Share with me 3 or 4 of your best friends' names. What are they like? What kind of grades they get? What other things are they involved in? I'm trying to monitor his huddle. In other words, when I was growing up in East Oakland, some of my friends, once again, my friends, right, start to engage in some negative things, right, off the athletic field, right? And they wanted me to join in. Here's what I always told them. Man, I'm trying to play some ball, right? Here's what my friends told me. They said, Joe, man, you think you're better than us. Here's what I told them. I'm not better. I'm just trying to do something different. I'm trying to make something out of my life. So I'm simply saying that when I was growing up, guess what? I had to kick some of my buddies what? Out of my huddle. Right? Because you become a mirror of your huddle. Don't ever forget this. I always tell teens this. You only get so many no's. Sooner or later, it just takes one yes. So once again, we're talking about what? The desire to fit in and be accepted. Okay? So huddle. Second, habitat. Where they hang out at. When my son wasn't playing ball at practice, I needed to make sure I knew where he was at. Can I help you with something? When I was growing up, right, I used to want to stay overnight at some of my friends' house. Here's what my mother said. I'm not letting you stay overnight at nobody's house. I don't know them people. She was monitoring my what? Habitat, where I hang out. Why do a lot of professional athletes get in trouble? Sometimes they huddle, sometimes it's what? Where they're hanging out at. Here's what they say, but I wasn't doing nothing. But that's a sign of your character, where you spend your time. Third is their host. In other words, whatever you host in your mind goes to one organ. What organ is that? Your heart. Anything that goes in your heart, what? Has to come out. It manifests itself in your behavior. Son, come home, you got the headphones on. Come here, son. What you listening to? Here's what I knew. If he listened to music with a lot of swearing in it, eventually into his heart, it'll come out of his what? Mouth. Also what? What are you watching on television? If you're watching violence, art, eventually you become a little bit more, what? Violent. So I'm simply saying as parents, it's going to be important, right? That you monitor what? Their huddle, their habitat, and what they're hosting. So, coach, what is character? It's the hidden person in the heart. That's the definition of character. The hidden person in the heart. Second principle, feeling emotional pain. In other words, ESPN did a study of professional sports. They discovered that home teams win on the average of 60% of their games. Why? It's because the crowd feels their emotional pain. So what we're saying is, what drains tank and what fills tanks? So let's start with drain. Criticizing and correcting kids drain their tank. Do we have the responsibility to correct them? Yes, we do. But when we do it over and over and over and over again, that's when it starts to drain their emotional tank. All right? Also, sarcasm. What players get the most attention on teams? What players? What players get the most attention? Okay, maybe troublemakers or the most gifted players. Sometimes there's some student athletes that are kind of in the middle, and maybe sometimes they feel ignored. Always encourage that as parents, when you show up to a game, right, is that you cheer on all the players. So, always say get a list of the players and their numbers, and you cheer for all of them. Also, non-verbally. How can you drain a tank non-verbally? Right? Player makes a mistake, they look in the stands, what do they see? So we're just saying, be mindful of our body language, because oftentimes our nonverbal does what? It speaks louder, right? Filling tanks, praise, but it must be what? Truthful and specific. Sometimes I hear, great job, excellent, nice, that's praise, but it's not what? Not specific. So what we're simply saying is that you can say, great job or excellent, nice, but now it's important to follow it up with specifically what they did well. Right? So think about that in terms of filling tanks. Express appreciation. In other words, I'll be honest, when I'm working with young people, I have high standards. In other words, all right, I'm reading this book, and one of the things it says is that as adults, all right, when it comes to high standards and high expectations, is that we need to get more focused on their character than how they perform. In other words, I'm simply saying that one of the things I was concerned about was how my son was interacting and respecting his teammate versus how well he performed on the field. Was he listening to his coach versus, how many hits he had. So once again, it had more to do with his character, so having that expectation. Listening feels tanks, but also, how can you fill a tank non-verbally? So, someone show me, how can you fill a tank non-verbally? Okay? See claps? Thumbs up? Anything else? Always say this. You know what they need to see us do more? Ready? Anyone know? Smile. Young people need to see adults smile more. It's just two things. Number one, it decreases their anxiety. And number two, it reminds them that they're out here competing, but they're also out here what? To have fun. So once again, we encourage you to kind of think about that. There's a magic ratio. Positives to one criticism. Any idea how many positives to one criticism to create an environment where our students thrive? Okay, 4. I think 5 to 1. 5 to 1. 2 studies. One with students. They discovered that once a teacher filled the emotional tank at 5 to 1, every kid began to thrive academically. Same study, this time with who? Married couples. They discovered that once married couples filled each other's emotional tank at 5 to 1, then their marriages begin to thrive. But it must be truthful and specific. Right? Team-friendly criticism. Couple things. Number one, we say avoid non-teachable moments. In other words, if your child fumbled the ball in the last few seconds of the game and they could have went in the score to tie the game, probably not a good idea to talk about how they should have carried the ball right after the game. Okay, their emotions are running high, right? So maybe they're upset. So we're saying what? Avoid those non-teachable moments. Also, one of the things we say is we encourage you, if you want to create a leader, we say act rather than tell. Instead of telling your team what to do, ask them. I'm curious, if you had to make that play all over again, what would you do differently? Now your child has to what? Think. Right? Next time, right, on that play, this is what you should do. Right? So instead of telling them what to do, ask them, what would they do differently? In other words, always say that. That's how you create thinkers. In other words, thinkers are leaders. Not leaders, not thinkers. Thinkers are leaders. So I want to create a leader in my child and making sure I'm asking them questions. One of the things I appreciate about the relationship that I have with my son was, from the time he was here to the time he's here, we always had conversations. In other words, I always say that when my son went off to college, anytime he experienced an adversity, he would pick up the phone. And guess who he would call? He would call his father. Here's what he knew. He wasn't going to hear, I told you so. He knew we were going to engage in a conversation. So once again, I encourage you to have conversations. In fact, in my book that I got coming out, I said no more lectures. Engage in conversations with your child. Also, one of the things we talk about is having what we call a criticism sandwich. That's where you have 2 pieces of bread, that's the meat, and then the corrections in the middle. So once again, if I may say, next time I encourage you to, the piece of bread were positive. I say, great job backpedaling. Next time, right, you want to turn the ball. Excellent job recovering. So once again, positive, correction, positive. Okay. Our third principle is called honoring the game. In other words, that word honor, it means respect, but it also means privilege. So once again, we encourage you to make sure that your child knows that every opportunity they get a chance to run out on that football field, it's a privilege, not a right. In other words, this game was here before your child was born. And this game will be here when they leave. So they need to know that every time you step on that field, it's a privilege. But it also means respect. First of all, respect for the rules. One of the things we say is bend the rules to win. Anyone familiar with what happened last week in college football at one of the universities? There you go, Notre Dame. You had 3 or 4 individuals at Notre Dame that got what? Kicked off the team. What did they get kicked off the team for? Academic fraud. Cheating. So once again, I'm just simply saying that they got full rides and now they got kicked out of university. Why? Because they didn't respect the rules. Once again, if they got accepted in Notre Dame, it's not, they can do the work. They decided not to put the work in. So once again, we want to make sure we respect the rules. Also, opponents, show respect even when we disagree. So once again, when it comes to your opponent, here's what child needs to know. You need an opponent to compete. What a great opportunity to measure where we are based on all the work that we put in. And I will say this, once again, even as what? Parents, we say, have a standard for how we conduct ourselves. In other words, if the other team at the other school is not respecting the game, we still have the standard that says, that's not the way we do things here. We're not going to stoop down to their level. We're going to continue to maintain a high standard for what we model for our student athletes. Also officials, show respect, even when you disagree. In other words, here's what I always try to prepare my son. Go into the competition knowing that there are going to be some bad calls. All right? So once again, I try to teach the importance of having some mental toughness. So in this sport, every sport, there's a human element. They're going to make some bad calls, they're going to make some questionable calls.